Issue 78. It starts with Tails driving in a car with Amy and Blaze in it, and I guess the reason he's not pulled over is that nobody can tell he's a kid just from looking at him at the wheel. Somehow this scientific genius is superstitious enough to hope the bad weather isn't an omen. Why does Amy call the metal virus the plague? Blaze lampshades said they would have been here sooner if they'd flown, and at least says sorry for asking her to make a detour and use the car instead. And Amy reassures her that she forgives her and ends up referencing her fear of heights. So it's subtly explained that that's why they took a car instead. Okay, but why did Blaze have to come with them? She's got super speed. Can't she just run on the ground while they take the plane in the same direction? She's not even that much of a social butterfly, so she wouldn't really miss the conversations with them. Idiots. They check on Barricade Town as I wonder why they ever bothered to. Amy thankfully lampshades that it's bad that she sounds disappointed that it's peaceful. Tails unrealistically reminds his friends that the point of this trip is to see if the loss of Restoration HQ negatively impacted towns in this region. Oh, I thought it was to see if Rough and Tumble went to terrorize this town again since they have a connection to it and are recently broken out of prison. Instead, they came to this specific town for no reason. Tails saying that a town wasn't affected somehow by the loss of a building 2 issues ago we were told was incredibly useful is really confusing and isn't good for world building. I thought we were supposed to see the HQ as valuable, and this doesn't do anything to disprove the Archie haters who refuse to acknowledge that. Blaze refuses to accept that the town doesn't need her help out of guilt, and Amy feels sorry for her and Tails shows his respect for her and her devotion to protecting others. They go to the town's restoration office, which helps with disasters. The good faith way of arguing is that they already had a disaster relief office, and so it's good the Restoration HQ is established, because it's always good to have a spare. It turns out they're doing just fine here after all, supposedly. Somehow this woman didn't know the HQ is destroyed, and yet she heard about an accident. That would have been all over social media instantly. This is a world that had a hoverboard tournament. People would have taken photos and videos of the burning building, and at the very least it would have still been on the news. The world building in this comic really is garbage. We can 3D print entire buildings now. Why didn't they 3D print a replacement Freedom HQ? She says she'll contact the offices in her immediate network and get supplies and volunteers there right away. I'd ask what took someone so long to tell someone in this kind of position this, but nobody would ever assume anyone with this job would be oblivious to the HQ's destruction anyway. It's relatable to not want to watch the news because it's depressing, and to stay away from social media for the same reason. But she doesn't explain that's why she's oblivious. Why didn't they visit Barricade Town much earlier instead of having not done so in issue 76? And you'd think she would have heard about its destruction from other people around her. Amy thanks her, and the car drives over a glass hill, which I never saw before. So at least it's trying to do world building. And they see a huge smokestack causing them to see firefighters putting out a small house fire. I'm glad that's not Surge's fault. So Blaze goes from saying confusion that she won't help to surprisingly being happy that she isn't needed here in the span of 2 panels. Someone tells them not to worry and says the restoration outpost here takes care of them, instead of the firefighters simply having a fire department before the restoration that Eggman would have had no reason to have gotten rid of when he rose to power. Even if he did get rid of it, he would have just replaced it with his own that would have been taken over by the citizens. So this only makes sense if the restoration merely has extra fire departments and disaster relief groups. But the world building sucks for not explaining that. In the suburbs, it literally takes 7 hours for a cop to get to a house, so clearly it would be good to have more police departments. So the restoration could be responsible for that, and that would look good on them. In fact, they're overstaffed and supplied. And someone says it's a long story that it feels like he owes the people of Emeraldsville personally. I guess he's the monkey who brought the metal virus into Restoration HQ because he didn't want to be alone. I could have sworn it was a different color. Maybe he dyed his fur so no one would recognize him. The whole issue so far, I'm just really impatient for Serge and Kit to show up. Why aren't they here yet? But these are the best game characters to be main characters from an IDW story because they're the ones written the best. Tails only has a problem in characterization when he's around Sonic. Amy only has a problem when she's in danger. So without those contexts, they're fine. He says he's going to lend a hand because people need help, and that's what the restoration is all about. And Amy hugs him for saying that, and he blushes. So it's nice that someone appreciates her hugs for once, but nothing's going to be done with this anyway, so whatever. I guess the reason it's believable that she's so nice to this guy, when she should be used to normal people joining the restoration to be helpful, is that this guy reminds us of Duo right from the start. And because of the actions of Mimic disguising himself as a normal civilian who wants to help, she'd be even more thankful at seeing an actual normal civilian who wants to help. And Amy shows nothing but optimism at the fact that the places they visited weren't in desperate need of their help. And I can't help but be surprised because I've seen so many stories where Sonic was deprived of Eggman and felt useless and bored. But Amy's best quality from the beginning has been her optimism, so for once, this is the comic getting her right instead of making her a worrywart. And it's using the fact that while she does have things in common with Sonic, she's not a female Sonic. Tails celebrates too, reassuring the audience that when Clutch tried to take Restoration HQ down, he failed. So I just realized the downside of this issue. As nice as it is, it's robbed Clutch of the entire point of his arc because he never even had a real win. He just made people upset for a little while instead of accomplishing everything he wanted. He truly is worthless as a villain when it comes to on-screen stuff now. I wonder if someone's gonna say that this is another instance of the writers fighting each other. Because Evan Stanley clearly wrote him to take down Restoration HQ. It's a big, everlasting villain moment for him. And there was a whole issue after that by Flynn that completely undermined it. Well, it's entertaining to see two writers bicker. Somehow, Blaze says they've done excellent work, which is lampshaded, and she was talking about the fact that they made the restoration. Then she would have just said that in the first place to avoid confusing her. She talks too much flattering them. Like, she didn't need to reiterate her point past the second sentence here. I'd always take padding sentences that compliment the characters that deserve it over the ones that don't, but still. Eventually they visit Turtle Shell Island, which apparently has a whole city on an artificial island in the middle of it. Well, this wasn't in the games. You can say the same thing about Emerald Hill having no village in it in the games, but it's still there in Sonic the Comic and I don't mind. I'm just thankful that it did world building on a location I'm more attached to because it's in a game instead. Blaze says all's well here, and when someone says you got that right, for some reason Amy and Tails are happy to hear that instead of scared at hearing Surge, who's making the complaint I'd expect after last arc that she's bored. Amy stupidly just stops at saying that it's a good thing there's no peril anywhere, and yet she expects that to be convincing to her. If she had any common sense, she'd be immediately trying to convince her that if she goes with them, they'll be better at finding places in peril for her because of their experience. Better yet, she could show her on a cell phone places that are in peril. And she's just not helping because there's militia there. Then the story wastes my time with Tails sweetly hoping Kit's been well just for Kit to still glare at him without a thought bubble explaining why. Even though it's Sonic he was given a real reason to hate. It turns out there's a bomb on something that blows up and a flood happens. I'm surprised I wasn't told how he got that bomb. It sure would be lazy writing if I never found out how he got it, since he was never taught engineering as far as we know. Tails ends up explaining that one of the anchor buoys blew up that keeps the town suspended over the lake. Somehow Surge thinks that the way to save the town is to bash the matching buoy. Blaze gets over to her and tells her that she made the town start sinking faster. I can't wait to find out how the hell Kit got them, because he should know if he got help from Eggman he would use that to blackmail him and Surge into ruining their reputations anyways. And I guess the reason he was able to get away with that is that he got the bomb and placed it when Surge was in the bathroom. But it's not like he's that fast. It must have been a bathroom close to the boy. And a bathroom close to the bomb. I guess he just conveniently raided an Eggman base for it that had a bathroom in it. The story starts blatantly wasting my time with people doing nothing and blathering. It's nice of Amy to want to check the town to see if anyone isn't here to get to an evacuation boat. We didn't need an entire page of this. Anyway, Surge realistically calls Blaze stuck up, but I'm just thankful she hasn't been fighting her. Because when she first showed up, the most predictable possible first meeting for them would have been that they were fighting. And this is just more creative and not repetitive. Amy tells her they're searching street by street, and even though she said as fast as we can, Surge somehow says that's not cool and flashy, even though it involved her running, which always looks cool and flashy. Not that this keeps her from agreeing to this, thankfully. I shouldn't need to explain this, but I say thankfully because I always had a little something called compassion for her, for having being a villain forced on her. Anyway, Tails explains that the reason the town already has an evacuation plan ready to go is that there's an active volcano below it that it was made for. Rather than sticking with the natural assumption that the plan was made in case Eggman took out the boys to sink the town because he's a jerk. But at least there was the additional world-building effort of having a volcano here. Tails says he thinks she can save the day. It doesn't elaborate in this panel, so of course Blaze is confused. He says she can control flames so she could get a thermal vent going, and the hot gases could keep the town afloat until the boys are repaired. Blaze blathers until saying she'll need a way to reach the bottom of the crater lake. Tails tells Kit that's where he comes in. And it's actually satisfying to see Kit uncharacteristically snark at him because he's right that if Tails was at his true potential, he'd already have a brilliant gizmo to fix everything. There's no reason to call it brilliant sarcastically. Tails is mature enough to not respond to that with hatred and instead tell him that Kit's gizmo and skills are what they need. And Kit gets scared because he doesn't want to upstage Surge. Surge says they're a package deal despite looking like she isn't okay with it and reasons that she'll get the glory by default, even though no one will have any way of knowing she was responsible for this, if she doesn't tell them, like an idiot. So ideally, she's just saying this to reassure him, which he's already developed into wanting to do since she said she got too careless to keep him from crying. And more importantly, she says this because if she doesn't encourage him to save people, then they won't get to do heroism, and she'll look bad. Thank goodness she said this. So Surge doesn't get to accomplish anything physically, since Amy finds the kid playing hide and seek. But she did do something vital by telling Kit to be useful. Still, I would have preferred if Amy didn't upstage her. It's cool to see Kit make a bubble around Blaze that contains an air supply. He gets her near the water, and while he tells her to be quick, the pacing still stops to have a long inner monologue that just recaps what everyone already knows about her past from the games. I already assumed she was being a hero here to pay it forwards to her friends to make her stop angsting over her fire powers. So Blaze saves the day and people cheer, and Tails tells Blaze great work, and plans to get the anchor lines temporarily secured. Amy bores me, and sadly, Surge doesn't care about what she accomplished because nobody saw her do anything. And sadly, the Kit plot point is still not done yet. The bombs on the anchors could have been put there by Eggman to give him a proper Eggman moment, and we'd still have the same plot. So there's no excuse for dragging this depressing bullshit out. It just continues to look like the writer's trying to ruin the nice direction for them out of pure sadism. There's a boring page where Mimic stares at Whisper from a distance, and I think of how convenient it is that he didn't get a Wisp on and shoot her with it. I just have to assume for the story to make sense that you need a background check to get a Wisp on. And he didn't happen to find anyone with one that he could stamp to steal the Wisp on from him. At least his dialogue serves the purpose of explaining why Whisper isn't paranoid and terrified from the fact that anyone she sees could be Mimic. Her time with her friends was so reassuring to her it made her soft. Okay, whatever. I think people with friends can still be paranoid. A better explanation is she knows that there's an extremely small chance that any random person she sees will be Mimic. So of course she's relaxing. Anyone you see could be a criminal. Even most people who experience trauma at the hands of some stranger wouldn't go on to keep assuming every stranger would do that to them a long time later. The story insists on ending there, with the text blurb blatantly lying that the next issue would be the last time Mimic and Whisper ever fought. After Mimic got broken out of prison, I refused to believe that. It'd only be true if the comic got cancelled before the writer ran out of ideas and had them fight again. It'd be nice if they replaced this lame shapeshifter with a good one. But it won't happen. He's so lame that apparently one of his tells is that he can't shapeshift his hands. So Whisper could have taken off his glove to reveal Duo as Mimic, which is way too easy. But the reason I never found that out was that there's no dialogue that explained it. Show me a line where they say, Mimic's too pathetic to change how his hands look, even though his hands are made of the same material as the rest of his body. And if a visual told me that, then I was too bored by the story to understand it. If nothing in the comics actually does tell you this, it's not real canon. This character is so underexplained that Evan Stanley had to make up some lore on the internet that he can't shapeshift into any size taller than Vector, making him the lamest shapeshifter in Sonic because Metamorphia can get way bigger than him. Well, he can never use his shapeshifting to be an actual threat that he wasn't before in a way that's creative aside from the obvious advantage. So he's got practically none of the actual appeal of a shapeshifter. He doesn't really understand what's great about a shapeshifter. Anyway, I refuse to accept paratextual internet canon as canon, because it's not fair because writers can establish anything on the internet. Sega isn't reading their social media posts to hold them back. So a writer on IDW would get to say on the internet that Sonic's beating up Amy every day, or he's dating a Shadow, or Kitsunami's not younger than Tails, even though that's unintuitive, and nearly every Sonic character is designed to be shorter than people older than them. This OK issue by Ian Flynn was eventually about Kitsunami and Blaze saving an island town from sinking by making some hot gas under it. Sadly, Surge immediately leaves the town unsatisfied because somehow she didn't even try to get the glory for it by telling people that she was the one who told Kid to save the town. Since when is it like her to give up on something ego-related so easily? You could even have the people not congratulate her hard enough because all she did was tell them to go somewhere and disappoint her. So there could still be sadism for the writer to extract from that. So there's no excuse. I hate that the writing was too lazy to explain where Kit got that bomb. It was a type of plot I don't think I ever saw before. It had stakes because the people in danger didn't have plot armor. And while the beginning was still boring, most of the time its main characters were characters I didn't hate, who were being written in character. It also did have Surge and Kit get to be heroes. So technically, it's got everything I'd want a story in this comic to do. So I can't exactly call it bad. The start of it was so dull that I thought it was. It's not ideal to have a story only get good after a point. The problem is, it's still got the slow pacing that always tries to make it so that at any moment the story can get boring by having too much boring dialogue with nothing happening. And there was room for more story in this one if the editor did his job by trimming things down. I think as long as these stories keep having that problem, I might never love an issue of this comic. I'll never stop mentioning it because it's the most constant problem of these writers. Sonic the comic had faster pacing than this, so there's no excuse.